Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, "Come on Beelzebub's cousin 19, be more involved or I will have to speak to your line manager." Alrighty then. Hello fellow Maccas, I've got a couple on here and this one actually happened yesterday. So a bit of backstory, I'm working from home and my job is mainly call-based, working in the advice sector in the UK. There are quality audits on your calls and I consistently get well-dones and excellent client experience. My line manager and quality management team struggle to find things to pull me up on. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of new staff due to the need for advice being more pronounced with the current unpleasantness, as our Tory overlords and betters would have us call it. Some people are not doing very well on their calls, so that means more training, yay. For everyone, meaning me, as well. Snark-o-meter settings updated to full on as soon as I heard this. I had the obligatory moan at my line manager in our monthly one-to-one meeting, you know, the stroppy teenager one. Why am I having to do this when my calls are okay? Why can't you just train the ones who need it? Why do you hate me and want me to die? This is so unfair. I hate you. So along comes the training. Actors in this scene are me, line manager 2, who is in the training with me, and the trainer, Happy Bright Smile. This training is being done over video and chat. So there's the usual hellos at the start, introduce yourself, and then the first activity. I say who I am to my colleagues of 8 years because they may have forgotten me and interact, however not to Happy Bright Smile levels. Happy Bright Smile, Beelzebub's cousin 19, have you got anything more to add? Me, nope, pretty much it. Happy Bright Smile, I'm sure you can add more, I've heard you have a lot of experience in this area. Me, and that's why I am taking a backseat. I could probably answer a lot of the questions and that wouldn't help my colleagues. Did I mention that our training was about vulnerable customers, suicidal, etc.? I have experience of it through jobs I have had in the past. Happy Bright Smile, her grin is getting more pronounced at this point. I think that your experience would help your colleagues. So I describe one of the situations I once dealt with and the aftermath, something you wouldn't deal with on the phone, and I can see some of my colleagues visibly wilt as I continue, so I draw it to a close with, "Is that enough experience?" A message appears from line manager 2 in my chat window, "Behave." Happy Bright Smile moves us on then to the next activity by putting a pin at, so I give a few anecdotes and I am volunteered to feed back to the group what we spoke about in the last activity. I do what I need by reading from my notes and I think give a factual and succinct response. And lo, Happy Bright Smile then says, in front of the group, the magic phrases. "Come on Beelzebub's cousin 19, be more involved or I will have to speak to your line manager." And try to be more upbeat. Other groups did role plays and new reports to give their feedback. Okie dokie, pig in a pokey, think I. For each activity after that I demanded to give the feedback each time. I then proceeded to give each report through the medium of poetry and rap. Because discussing suicide always sounds better to a funky rap, right? I was only allowed to do 3 before I was asked to let someone else do it. I would love to give my rap here, however it includes my company's name, so best not. All my colleagues did say it was really funny and it stopped Happy Bright Smile from being so upbeat. Remember, if they ask you to be more involved, go for it. Next one is titled, "Cut Me Off After Trying to Warn You." You can get escorted out, thanks. In 2013, back when I was working at a movie theater in my town, like a rich uppity area. Right after Wolf of Wall Street came out. It caused problems. Now, working at a movie theater, you can usually just tell after a while what people know what they want and people who think they know what they want but have no idea what they are getting into. After a lot of refunds for Wolf of Wall Street because of a scene, Leo did drugs off a woman of the night's butt. We were told to warn people exactly what they were getting into. Because we were getting a crap load of refunds every showing and we were too busy to not keep them waiting a while, so it was my job. So cue, our little old lady, we will call Agnes. Agnes was a little old lady, who was a short but large woman with a very short pixie cut. She wore active-wear leggings, an overlarge t-shirt, and a fanny pack. She waddled over to my ticket booth fishing her money out of her fanny pack. "1 ticket to Wolf of Wall Street," Agnes stated before yelling loudly. "Senior." "Yes, Agnes, I can tell you need a senior, and yes, she was not the type for this movie." "Okay, but just so you know it's R-rated," I started, but she groans and rolls her eyes, slapping her hand on the table. "Just do your job and give me a ticket. I'm going to be late," Agnes stated. Cue my malicious compliance. "1 senior coming up." I handed her her ticket as she snatches it out of my hand and waddles off to the theater. I waved goodbye. As if on cue, 30 minutes into her entering the theater, her, like most people who have no idea what they are getting into, walks out of the theater. I was about to call my manager with glee for a refund, happy for my subtle revenge, when I realized she had just come out to make a call. All my hopes and dreams crumbled. Maybe I misread her, but she was for sure not the type to enjoy this movie. I sighed in defeat and went back to waiting for movies to get out. That was until not long after her call, 3 police cars with flashing lights pulled up to the front of my theater. I paused in noticeable confusion as 6 police officers came in with their hands on their side pistols. Since again, I was in a ticket booth, they approached me. "Ma'am, we got a call about some illegal films here." The police officer, "We will call Robert," stated. I stated in a loud, long, continuous my eyes slowly drifting to Agnes, who was waddling quickly up to me. "Arrest her," Agnes demanded as I just continued my continuous "And arrest them too." She pointed to the concession workers in loud, noticeable anger. "For what reason, ma'am?" Robert asked, now seeing how calm and quiet the theater was because the movies were in. "For that disgusting illegal thing of what they are trying to say is a movie." Agnes huffed, she was red in the face and panting. "I demand you shut this place down. Were you the one that called about the children engaging in adult activities illegally films? Can't say it or it won't be approved." Robert asked as completely went dead silent. "Child what? We had nothing remotely like that here or ever." "Yes," Agnes stated. "That thing in there, that Wolf of Wall Street, is illegal. They cannot show that kind of trash in there." "Ma'am, I saw that movie. There is nothing really illegal in it, and there are no children engaging in adult activities illegally films in it either." Robert stated, pretty ticked off. "Is this why you called us?" "Yes. Because back in my day, the police would have shut this place down." Agnes was screaming her head off as 2 of the officers got the hint and just left. "Ma'am, do you know what you did is illegal? It is filing a false police report. 911 is for emergencies only. Not for your bad movie reviews." Robert had enough of her at this point. "But I didn't file a false police report," Agnes whined as Robert turned to me in a very, very nice tone. "Have a great day, ma'am." He beamed with obvious annoyance. They started to file out and Agnes angrily followed them, yelling to them. Right when Robert was about to exit the door, Agnes grabbed the push bar for the door and yanked it back to keep the door closed to not let him leave, hitting Robert with the door. Yes, if you're wondering, that does count as assaulting an officer. Last I saw, Agnes was escorted to the police cruiser with shiny new arm bracelets. Though, I'm not sure what happened to her. But I never saw Agnes again. I did see Robert though. He got a free movie on me, but it was busy and I couldn't talk to him to see what happened with our dear old friend. But I can tell it was just amazing things. Next one is titled, Escalate, Rinse, Repeat. Part of my job involves processing repair, service orders for the medical devices we make. I enter them in the computer and send them to the service department for maintenance or repair. Sometimes customers will request that particular orders be escalated to the quality assurance team for problems that are long-running, recurring, or potentially dangerous. Either they'll call in the problem and a note will be put on the account to escalate, or they'll write an escalation request on the paperwork they send us. I was told to keep an eye out for orders that have the same kinds of red flags that escalation orders typically have, and using my own best judgment send them to the quality assurance team even if the customer has not explicitly asked to escalate the order. When I was first hired, I didn't have the experience necessary to make those determinations on my own, so I didn't escalate any extra orders. Eventually I was comfortable enough to make those judgment calls, so I started being more proactive about escalating orders. Within a few weeks, my manager pulled me aside to tell me that the QA team was complaining that I was escalating too many orders to them. I was surprised, but promised to do better. I investigated and found that the unofficial understanding was that as long as the customer wasn't complaining, we weren't supposed to invent more work for the QA team. That meant less work for me too, so I was fine with it and stopped proactively escalating. The malicious compliance. Like it or not, the requirement to proactively escalate orders to the QA team remained part of the official process. As near as I can tell, it was put in solely so management could point to it and say, "See? We encourage our employees to go above and beyond." The practical consequences would go as follows. Every year or two, a manager would notice that requirement and remind our group to follow it. Our protests would be ignored. We would comply and start proactively escalating orders. The quality assurance team would complain to our bosses that we were escalating too many. Our managers would warn us to back off. We would entirely stop with the proactive escalating. The QA team would thank our management, and our management would tell us how happy they were with our progress. This has happened 3 or 4 times since I was hired. We've started betting on how long until the next time it happens, and how long until the QA team complains when we do start this foolishness again. Edit. A few clarifications. I'm on the operations team, not customer service. I don't directly communicate with customers often. Our customers are doctors, not their patients. And the devices are typically quality of life, not directly life-saving. Next one is titled, Customer Service Compensation Offer Not Enough? I work customer service for a credit card company. One thing I noticed is that most people don't pay attention to what you say. They hear what they think they will hear or expect to hear. I frequently have to explain things several times and have learned to require repeat back of important information, and sometimes document what I say when my spider senses tingle. I had a customer, Bob, call though with what I thought was a genuine issue, which I fixed for him. I can't even remember what the issue was. Bob said he wanted compensation. I thought that was fair enough. I offered the max amount I can, just say, 5 out of 5, of goodwill or compensation. Bob replied, "That isn't enough, I want 2. I said, "You want to reject my offer and instead have me give you 2? Bob said, "Yes, I want 2. I said, "All right, I will add that to your account and you will see it tomorrow." I thanked him and said goodbye. I never heard back from him or received any feedback, and I did wonder if Bob ever thought about the call and realized he asked me to give him less than 1/2 of what I offered. Bob expected me to offer 1 of 5 and had already started negotiating in his head. I have to say it has made me smile on several bad calls since then. Next one is titled, "Oh, I can't use your players? Then go lose without mine." This story happened around May 2019 when I was coaching sports part-time at my old high school while studying towards my degree, and I'm not too sure it's malicious compliance, but anyway. Edit. U16 equals under 16. So I'm quite good at sports, and this is something I only discovered in high school. I'd never really played sports competitively prior to that, but at the high school I went to, doing so was compulsory. I say I'm good at sports not to toot my own horn, but because there's no sport I've seriously played without at least becoming as good as the best players I'm exposed to. This was the case with both football, soccer, and field hockey. It was certainly the case with squash, in which I became the best player in the school by the time I finished 9th grade. By the time I'd finished 10th grade, I was in the first team of all the sports I played, and I was better than even the school's squash coaches. So in 11th grade, 2013, one of the coaches told me that I should come back to the school and coach squash if I'm not studying too far away. Fast forward a few years to 2019, and I'm coming towards the end of my engineering degree. I'm on the university squash team, and not only am I also now coaching my old school's boys and girls squash teams, but I'm also coaching their senior boys hockey team. Now, one of my co-coaches for boys hockey was a guy that had been 3 grades below me in high school. Let's call him Carl. Like me, Carl was pretty good at sports, and I'll admit that by the time he finished high school he was a better hockey player than I had been. In my subjective opinion, I'll say that this got to his head quite a bit. Anyway, we were now both coaching hockey at the school, and he had the U16 boys, but his attitude said that he thought he should have the senior team. Now, because I had the senior team, I had first pick of all the boys from U16 upwards at the beginning of the season. Needless to say, I picked the best boys, and 4 of them happened to be U16s. This was certainly ideal because my biggest strength as a coach is developing individual skills, and in terms of developing individual skills, the younger the better, and after a few weeks, you could certainly tell the difference with these 4 boys. As such, Carl decided to start asking my boys to play in his matches because they were U16, but he did so without asking me. I didn't make this a big deal because it simply meant they were getting to play with their actual friends and they got more game time. Unsurprisingly, my boys were always the key players in his matches and were often the difference between a win, a draw or a loss. This happened for 4 or 5 games without fail before schools went on break. We had the annual regional tournament coming up after the break, and I thought I could use one more player, so I asked my captain to speak to a specific U16 boy to play for me in the tournament and join my practices during the break, and for me that was that. I trusted my captain to get back to me once he'd heard back from the boy in question, and I'd go from there. So you can just imagine my shock when I get a text from Carl demanding why I went and asked his boys to play for me without asking him first. Obviously I reply saying that I only asked one boy and that I didn't think it was a problem since he'd used my boys multiple times without asking me. He then insists that he's asked me every time he's used my boys, and I tell him no, he hasn't. The ensuing argument was not pretty. He refused to admit that he was basically being a hypocrite, and I wouldn't let go of the fact that he was the first to use players without asking. Eventually I said that we should agree to disagree and that we shouldn't make a big deal out of what is essentially a side hustle for both of us. Maliciously, I also added that to avoid any future altercations, we should just not use each other's players. Now caught in the consequences of his own hypocrisy, he tried to backpedal a little, but I wouldn't budge. See, I didn't need his players, I had just wanted an extra player for a weekend-long tournament that him and I had once played in as teammates. So it goes without saying that I didn't try to use any of his players again, and now he couldn't use mine either. Carl's team did not perform very well after that. Next one is titled, "But ma'am, you asked us to write like this." This takes place in 2013, when I was still in high school. Those were the days where we would write our assignment on actual paper, do you remember that? Anyway, we had a terrible English teacher that pretty much everyone despised. One day, after the summer break, we had to write an essay about summer jobs, and before we start she says something along the lines of, "Be original, I'm tired of always reading the same stuff. Hee MC time." While the content itself wasn't anything special, my friend and I decided to spice it up a bit. We started writing in a concentrically way, meaning that the first line was horizontal, then turn the paper 90 degrees, write the next line, rotate the paper 90 degrees, and so on and so forth. It was so beautiful, a pitter to read and absolutely evil. We turned in at the last minute and quickly left. When we got our essays back, she had actually read and graded them. Mine was a checkmark plus, meaning actually good, but she reprimanded us for being smartasses, and what the heck was that, BLA, and next time just write horizontally. I think you might have figured out where this is going. The next essay comes up, and sure enough we follow the prescriptions. We write one line on the front of the paper, one line on the back, one line on the front, one on the back, all perfectly horizontal. Turn it in at the bottom of the pile and run. Next week comes around and the teacher was starting to get seriously upset. "Do you know how much time it took me to read this? Just who the hell do you think you are, yada yada." "But ma'am, we were just following the instructions, as you asked us to do," we replied with our sweetest and most innocent faces. She was mad. "Listen, I don't have the time and energy to deal with this BS, just keep the damn text on one side of the paper." Hey, new instructions to follow. Sure enough, the next essay had all the text on one side, all horizontal. But one line was normal, the next one was upside down, the next one normal, etc., like a snake. A true work of art. On a side note, all those essays were very basic in terms of content, since writing in those weird ways would take a lot more time compared to writing normally. Everyone was wondering what we would come up with this time and how far we could push this. This, however, was the last straw. I can't remember how it exactly went down, but she was absolutely livid. She snapped at us and threatened to fail us. While she technically couldn't, since our exam grades were quite good and we were just following the guidelines, she stopped correcting our essays. She crossed the last one so violently she pierced through the paper. We concluded that it was a satisfactory result and stopped with our innovations. The class was entertained and we had our fun as well. Next one is titled, "Do It 10 Times." Okay. I'm a basketball coach and this happened to a colleague, or whatever you call it, of mine. She gave practice to U12, and told them, starting from the baseline, you run up to this line and tap it with your hand. This you do 10 times. Now this was something they did more often, so it didn't need much explanation. It was implied you run back to the baseline, and repeat 10 times. N comes the smart kid. He runs up to the line, stops and starts tapping it repeatedly while loudly counting 1, 2, 3 until 10, and he walks off with a grin on his face. The coach laughed so hard she couldn't even be mad. She changed her explanation from that point on. Last one is titled, "I can't take cash for my canteen allowance." Okay. This is not my story but my brother-in-law's, and it came to a very satisfying conclusion today. My brother-in-law has been working remotely since March of last year as part of the IT department for an insurance company. As part of their compensation, they get canteen credit every month. The company didn't stop these payments while everyone was working remotely and gave the employees no chance to spend the credit as the canteen was obviously closed. My Bill got a new job recently and had just under €1,000 left in his canteen credit. He asked the company before he left could he take some of it out in cash or transfer it to a co-worker. They would not allow him do this. Here comes the MC. He looked up the canteen website and they allowed you to use your credit to send a wine and chocolate gift set to someone. You see where this is going. So he decided to purchase as many as he could and gift them to himself. This morning he received 19 gift boxes. Thanks for listening.